All right, it's time for our weekly update on the income store litigation. I checked over at the income store receivership website. Nothing super exciting over there. They don't have any of the up-to-date filings. They do have now some important dates, but I think it's out of date at this point. I checked over on Pacer, and I do note that there is some activity in the last week after my last video. There was a motion for protective order and a status report. I got the protective order and I got the status report, and I think the status report is going to be of the most interest to everyone. And here it is. So what's important in this, and what is a status report? In federal court, the parties are really forced to stay on track. Like, it's really hard in federal court for cases to get lost and off track and delayed. I mean, it's going to take a long time to get through federal court, but not because the court isn't actively pushing the case forward. In general, the judges are really interested in running a tight docket and then making sure things happen when they're supposed to. And as part of that, the parties come together a lot to tell the judge what is going on and to set up deadlines. Now, they might not make those deadlines. It's kind of like those of us who are working at home or even at our jobs, right? We have to have something we're always working towards. And if we can't meet that deadline, we have to be able to justify it. And honestly, a federal judge is the last person I want to go to try to justify missing a deadline. But here is the status report, and this is going to give us likely some information about what's going on and then what we can expect going forward. So this is a joint status report, meaning the parties both got together and prepared this and agreed to the language in it. So the joint status report was intended to update the court on 3 topics: the status of the accounting, any issues concern the transfer of full control of the business and assets to the receiver, and the parties' position on whether or not there will be a contested hearing about the initial injunction, meaning the court's orders about the business. So to talk about Courtright's accounting, Ken was initially ordered to provide the accounting by January 6th. If you recall in the last video, there were some extensions granted. He's supposed to come up with a current asset and liabilities list, other transfers in excess of 10 grand in the last 12 months, money received. I mean, there's a whole bunch of stuff. That accounting wasn't provided on the 6th. So again, like, this is a great way to sort of get caught up on all the things that happened. So on the 13th, Courtright got additional time because Ken had just gotten counsel, and because, like we said in the last video, it would be really hard to create all of this documentation without having access to his computers or any of his data, which he had been frozen out of. As we knew from the previous video, that the SEC wasn't bothered by these requests for more time and was pretty understanding about the whole, I need access to my files to make these reports for you, because that totally makes sense. So between January 14th and January 21, the parties were talking about the devices. Ultimately, the SEC and Courtright served discovery requests on the receiver. Those are written demands for access to either documents or to devices. Let's see, on the 22nd, the parties and the receiver submitted what we call a stipulated motion, or everybody agreed to some sort of method to provide Ken Courtright and his attorneys access to a laptop and a hard drive, and also provide access to that data to the SEC. I mean, the goal in this is to make sure that the data is just preserved, whatever it is. It says that Courtright has begun to prepare his accounting, and he will have until the 30th, which is tomorrow, to serve his verified accounting on the SEC and the receiver. Is this going to be served by the 30th? It's hard to say. As of right now, Pacer doesn't give us any information about the status of that. Let's see what else. Transfer of computers and other company assets. The receiver states that they've received all laptop computers that they had previously mentioned were missing or in transit. Specifically, the laptop computer that today's growth consultant executive David Kelly had mailed to a former counsel for defendant Courtright. So David Kelly sent his laptop to Ken Courtright's lawyer at some point, who is no longer involved. And since the status conference, the receiver has received laptop computers from 5 former executives. The receiver states they have full control over all known accounts and assets, with the exception of 3 additional accounts that receiver recently learned about at 3 banks. So the preliminary injunction. What's an injunction? Basically, it's the court orders to tell the parties to do or not do something. After all, remember, the SEC has filed a whole bunch of requests that the company and Courtright comply with. And so the receiver is handling everything involving the company, and Ken Courtright is on his own with his lawyer. And so the receiver, on behalf of the company, is prepared to agree to the entry of that preliminary injunction and asset freeze. Ken Courtright has not yet made a decision about whether or not to agree to the preliminary injunction or to contest it at a hearing. Let's see, it says that Ken Courtright's lawyer hoped to provide everyone with an update on the issue of whether or not there was going to be a contested hearing at the the hearing scheduled on the 27th or at the latest by Monday the 3rd. I'm checking Pacer, but I don't see anything in there as of yet entered from that hearing that states what happened. The reason these deadlines or these dates matter is because the receiver's report is due and Ken Courtwright's answer and accounting are due, and they note that these are events which may influence Ken's decision on how to proceed. The parties have agreed to a briefing schedule for the motions and the dates for the preliminary injunction hearing. So on February 7th, SCC has a deadline to file supplemental paperwork. February 14th, Ken Courtwright has a deadline to file more paperwork, and then the 21st, another deadline, and then the hearing is tentatively scheduled now for March 4, 5, or 6 of 2020. Signed by all the lawyers. So that's the status of the case. I got a hold of the protective order, but I don't think you'll find it as exciting unless you're an attorney or this kind of stuff really excites you as far as like pleadings and the legalese. But the parties agreed to a protective order to work on preserving electronic data and to preserve privilege. In that motion, they just note that the receiver seized a bunch of electronic devices from the company and from Courtwright. Courtwright believes that the devices contain both business and personal information, and some of that personal information may be subject to a legal privilege. I mean, who knows what else is on these laptops? It could be emails between him and his attorneys, which are privileged. It could be information that would be privileged in another way. Maybe it was just stuff that would be embarrassing, like personal photos. I mean, I don't even want to like guess what that could potentially be, but think about all the things that you might have on your laptop, especially your personal laptop. And here's the order itself. It actually identifies specifically which computers and the model numbers. And basically a bunch of other legalese. Before I go, I just wanted to share this blog post that has been sent to me a few times, and I also observed it, or at least the information about it, in the Flipping Websites Facebook group. This individual went and pulled as much information as he could about the websites that Income Store actually owned or was on record with owning. He did a reverse IP lookup and then ran the list through Hrefs and View DNS and then did some analysis about it. And you might find this interesting. Thought I would share it. I haven't had a chance to look at it closely, but other people have said that it was good information. Well, that's what I've got for today. I'll check Pacer again at the end of the month, so in 3 days on the 31st, and see if there's anything worth recording on again. Otherwise, I'll just plan on checking in with everyone and on the case next week. Thanks so much for watching, everyone, and we'll see you in the next one.